some of you. Okay, so now the recording has started. So IIT Bombay, for those who do not know, is one of the premier technology institute. The faculty members here not only have to teach, they have to sort of do research and possibly do some extension or outreach, as they call it. And the students essentially do sort of, of course, you have the website of IIT Bombay as iitb.ac.in. You can see what all academic units we have, and sort of departments as well as centers. So departments are regular engineering departments like mechanical, electrical, civil, chemical, etc., like any conventional engineering program. And we have also some 9 interdisciplinary centers like industrial engineering and operations research, systems and control. Like one of that is like Center for Technology Alternatives for Rural Areas. And am I audible? Am I audible, Dr. Surbi? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Yeah. So we have a pedagogy or curriculum in a postgraduate program. We call it as technology and development, and we offer MTech, masters in technology, in T&D, as we call it, technology and development, and also PhD programs in technology and development. And essentially we train engineers and scientists, and even of late some architects, I mean those who come from planning background, on how do you use technology as a tool for development. Because often at times, the tradition set during, subsequent to independence, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the engineers were not so trained to sort of do extension of their skills. They were doing consultancy work, they're carrying out work, implementing. So like we had things like, doctors without borders, or in French they call médecins sans frontières, doctors without borders. And then we had engineering association, which was called VITA, for example, volunteers in technical assistance. I still distinctly remember when I myself went for my master's program in a institute located in Bangkok, International Institute called Asian Institute of Technologies. So we had done a project there during my MTech, which was funded by VITA, volunteers in technical assistance. So I actually have my first degree, my first formation is in agricultural engineering. And I did my master's in agriculture, machinery and food processing at Asian Institute of Technology, Bangkok. And then subsequently, after taking some work experience in field in Bangkok, in Thailand, I went to sort of France to do my PhD in process engineering. And my PhD problem was also extremely close to ground. It was not theory. I just want to bring out that aspect of being, engineers in practice. So I worked on pyrolysis technologies, where we sort of used wood and woody biomass to make some renewable fuels. So I completed it in 1990. Then I did, as a part of my PDF postdoctorate fellowship in France, I worked on a EEC ASEAN project. EEC is European Economic Commission, for those of you who would not know. And ASEAN is Association for Southeast Asian Nations, which is like, basically Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines. Singapore, of course, does not have so much agriculture, but Indonesia so these 5 ASEAN countries were wanted to have a sort of, some technology transfer, so to say, from European countries, which are so rich in biomass, and which had sort of that point in time the technologies which were of relevance to, the countries where ASEAN countries. I was saying that they had some wherewithal economic, but they did not have technologies how to sort of do value add, or we call it in engineering, valorization. Valorization is like, low value materials. How do we sort of add value to it and make some energy of higher forms which you can use? So, and then subsequently in 1991 September, I joined IIT Bombay, the Center for technology alternatives for rural areas. Let me see if I can use a pointer option here. Yeah. So this is the Center for Technology Alternatives for Rural Areas. And the talk that I'm planning to give today is agriculture, food, livelihoods, and nutrition, as was announced by Dr. Surabhi. On trying to see, like, based on the case studies that I will present from my domain, like agro industries, food process engineering, and foods and nutrition, that I taught sort of all these years, and what kind of projects that we had done, and can this become some kind of a possibility to motivate my interlocutors here, or the people with whom I'm interacting, on how can NGOs catalyze, complement government actions, some example projects in livelihood support. That's what, sort of, okay. So is this a participant coming in between? I mean, like, is it, let's say, screen? No. Okay, is the sort of photograph of this gallery view of participants coming in between the screen, or is it okay, Dr. Surbi? Are you able to see my entire screen?
Yes. We can see your entire screen. No worries. No problem.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, like what Einstein in the literature, you say that he described that there are two types of knowledge. One is like, of course, he termed it as a dead knowledge in forms of reports, handbooks, and textbooks, because otherwise what we would understand that these libraries, or the repositories of knowledge, where you have all the books, reports, and handbooks, they could become the best consultants or something like that, but it doesn't happen. So we see that the librarians, or those who sit on these books, really do not sort of put things into action. Whereas what he calls as live knowledge is people, and those who practice, for example, and put those handbook knowledge into a sort of making actions or executing things. So in the current context, what I have put my thoughts is like, there are a very strong observation that one makes globally, not only in India centric context, but globally, that there are new ways of production, consumption chains. They may be emerging. So what we are saying is like, there is a typical supply chain in agriculture, that you have farmers. Like, you take a city like Mumbai or Pune, for example, all its vegetables would be coming from places like Nasik and Pune district, and the farmers would be sending for, let's say, 200, 250, 300 kilometers. So and so the producers or the farmers would look for markets which are 300 kilometers away. And even within these district places, let's say you take a district like Thane or Palghar, the small farmers whom we visited, we say that they have lost these markets. Like in Palghar, for example, in Mokhada and Jawhar, in small townships, they are unable to send it, because of COVID conditions, the mobility is restricted. They are unable to send, and even at times, even these villages, people used to get, let's say, for example, in Jawhar and Mokhada, some vegetables and fruits from Nasik. So that supply chain is kind of broken. So new ways, what we say, are emerging, for example. And therefore, I mean, like, this is one observation. And second observation is like, there is a reverse migration. Lot many people on big urban cities have migrated. I mean, those who had come here for 20, 30, 40 years back, looking for jobs, they have gone back, and they are unable to find something which is sort of, they can engage into. So if we can sort of, take this as a kind of an opportunity and use agro-food processing technology, because agriculture has not stopped. During COVID's times, agriculture has not stopped. Farmers are producing, they are growing their crops, and you have things like that. So what the question that I'm putting here is, how should this domain of agro-food processing, making nutritious products, how can they sort of address the problematics or the problems or the situations that we have at hand, you know. So what are those sort of what I will actually do is I will kind of do this guided tour of this talk through some 4 or 5 different case studies that I have put together to illustrate this proposition that I'm talking about. And I will talk about, you know, through some videos of 4 or 5 minutes so that you can capture it, you know, better as to what kind of interventions we had done in, let's say, these poly houses made out of bamboos as Nutri Gardens, because we'll go one by one, but just to sort of let you know, Nutri Garden is something which we have evolved as a concept subsequent to kitchen gardens. Kitchen gardens was something which very, very, very popular. You go to Britain, for example, you know, what we had sort of seen there. I don't know if Dr. Surbhi during her Oxford trip had an opportunity to go and talk to some British people. 70% of the British people keep gardens, you know, and which was quite a sort of, this actually I captured during my Europe stay, during my doctoral, that people, which is not what is happening in our country here. Whatever reasons, you know, land not enough. Mumbai, for example, people cannot have enough land to keep that kind of a garden around. So can we sort of capture this kitchen garden and sort of, you know, a Nutri garden concept, and you will see that in the video. Next is like, you know, jaggery making. Some of you may or may not know, jaggery is kind of an unrefined sugar that one makes from sugarcane, because sugarcane is a crop which number of states, including Uttar Pradesh, UP, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, they make a lot of this sugarcane, and most of the sugarcane, you know, of late is going into the sugar mills. Something like, you know, the current proportion is 80-20. Whereas, you know, pre-independence era, it was exactly reverse. 80% of the cane which is grown, harvested, was going into jaggery making as a sweetener. But somehow, you know, within last 7-8 decades, we gotten used to this refined sugar, which is much more consumer friendly. And there are lots of, you know, just take Maharashtra case, for example, you have something like 165 cooperative sugar mills. And since it was kind of a tool for a lot of political forces to sort of, you know, just set up this kind of a mill, which can sort of engage people. So it is one of the agro industry, for example, served its purpose in certain time. But, you know, the results, for example, of late, India has been sort of last 10 years been a capital of diabetes. Okay, so there are, if what science says, if you look into the literature, that jaggery is, or unrefined sugar is much health friendlier sweetener than the refined sugar, because refined sugar is nothing but 99.99% sucrose, whereas jaggery has certain minerals and which is sort of, you know, kind of health friendly. So quite a few of our older generation knows that, you know, you go to Rajasthan, Maharashtra, even Chennai, West Bengal, that if somebody comes from hot sun, walk outside, you would get one glass of water and one small sort of, khada of sugar of the jaggery, or a small piece of jaggery, which actually did the balance of minerals in your body. So that was some kind of a wisdom, and we so last sort of 8 to 10 years, we have been sort of working, me and my colleagues in chemical engineering, as to sort of find out the, you know, impart some scientific legitimacy to what was the Ayurveda knowledge, and you know, like for because in food processing there is a general norm. People want minimally processed or least processed, something which is natural, you know, so something which is organic, non-fertilizers, something which has no preservatives being used or something like that. So I'll present that story of our work for last 7-8 years, how that kind of an artisanal industry for farmers, how we can revive. Because our survey, when we did this work, we started, like, we call those projects as end-to-end solution. You know, so we had surveys of some 200-300 jaggery making units in Kolhapur district, and we found that some 15-20 years back, there was something in single district of Maharashtra, we had 1,200 units, each crushing about 10 tons of cane per day. Now that 1,200 number has come to just 400. look at that, and then we tried to find out what are the reasons, like this is making some a product which has some USP, like you can make certain products like puran poli, if some of you may have heard, modak, if you have heard, these are delicacies, local delicacies are made out of jaggery. And when we know that this has got merit, what is the reason that 1200 has become 300? So that story which narrates through a video will tell you what are the reasons, that kind of drudgery that people have to go through in making. Last 150 years, not much technology sort of has been integrated into this practice of jaggery making. If one gets a sort of opportunity to visit, not even Kolhapur, just if you are in Pune, for example, go to a place called Down, you have some 200 jaggery making units, and look at the kind of 10 to 16 hours per day these laborers put in, and how drudgery driven it is. Like he has to stand near that furnace which has about temperature of 150 degrees Celsius, and it makes it very drudgery driven. Then I will also narrate you a story of something that we did with a public hospital called Sion Hospital in Sion. We sort of put up a small plant of making RUTF, as it is called in the international literature. We named that product, which is like peanut butter based, and which has got some milk proteins and things like that. We called it as MNT, medical nutrition therapy. And this was for SAM children, severely acute malnourished. And Dr. Surbi may recall that in Oxford, we did sort of make a presentation on this RUTF through one of our MTech students' work on how we did work with Anganwadis, because Anganwadi children are between 3 to 6 years. But at Sion Hospital, they have what they call it as NRRTC, Nutrition Rehabilitation Research and Training Center. So NRTTC, there is a story with which sort of it started, that when we from IIT Bombay, we went, me and my colleague, to the head of the Department of Pediatrics in Sion Hospital. She said, we have all heard through UNICEF, WHO, WFP, which is like World Food Program and all that, about RUTF. But if you are ready to put up such a unit in our backyard, in our Sion Hospital, we will give you a place. If you put up, then only I'm ready to sort of do this intervention. And it so happened, you will see it in the video here, that how we sort of set up that unit of making MNT or RUTF, as it is known. Then we also had a project on community management of MAM. So what was happening with this government of Maharashtra WCD ministry, Women and Child Development, that secretary there had a very, very strong feeling, and along with the commissioner of ICDS in Maharashtra, both of them had a very strong feeling that if we can stop these MAM children falling into SAM, MAM is moderately acute and SAM is severely acute. So if we can stop at that stage, MAM becoming SAM, they do not become a burden on your public health system. And so if you can develop some kind of formulations, as you have something for SAM. So there was some philosophy in the government bureaucracy that, something made in factory or something made in production units like what we have given to Sion Hospital, can we do something which is like, community managed? So there was this concept, or there still is going, like, how can you have CMAM approach, community management of malnutrition? And so we made some micronutrient fortified foods. This is very, very similar to what THRs of ICDS they talk about. ICDS is Integrated Child Development Scheme of Government of India, one of the flagship programs of the government since last 10, 15, 20 years, but it has not given the desired results. And this particular film will talk about what were the reasons as to how sort of, monotonous food is being given to this people in Anganwadis. And I personally happen to travel to Nandurbar, Solapur, and in different areas, and people responding to that instead of feeding it to the malnourished children, they gave it to their cattle. It was so bad in terms of its test, and so for whatever reasons that THR did not work, and we tried to sort of compare as a scientific study as to compare between THR children and the sort of the children who were taking these project designed foods, and what was the difference in terms of getting these man children out of their condition of malnutrition. And there is a small, I think that is only in slides. I have something on medicinal oil unit, muscle pain reliever. So this was something which the Ayurveda people have, along with the orthopedic people, is if you have a muscle pain, how you can. So there are various kinds of, Narayan oil you might have heard. Lots of those things. This was something in our, again, in Ayurveda, which was known. And there is nothing innovation that we did. What we did was we just put our engineering principle of thermodynamics and sort of, made this what the, in those Guru Shishya Parampara, they were making this oil using Siddhataila process, and it required something like 6 to 7 days. They were doing some continuous extraction of those nirgudi leaves, and bioactives were extracted. We did it in 6 hours by using our vacuum principle. So you will be able to see that in the schematics. Okay, so this is some theory here. I don't know how am I not able to remove this. Is Dr. Surabhi, is this coming? This meeting has been upgraded by the host, and now which I'm seeing on my screen. Okay, yes. I am able to remove that. Okay.
It can't be seen on your screen. Don't worry.
Okay. All right. No. Fine. So there are some kind of like we had within our department, we have some 3-4 people who work in this domain. So we had some kind of a criteria, like as to what should be the interventions, and we have put that in the sort of, that it should have a quick payback time. Otherwise, people will not be sort of investing into this, although you have sort of, a demand which is raised of livelihood generation. But what could be those sort of, criteria? We had some of those. It should be locally available resources, and it should be sort of resource conserving, as we typically call it, more from less. Our Dr. Mashelkar, who was the CSIR director from Pune, he always talks about this more from less for more, or something like that. Resource conserving, basically, technologies does not depend excessively on sophisticated technical manpower. Strained, as example, if you have a tomato puree making plant that you see in Nashik, for example, you have some 100 tons per day of plant, but which requires a sophisticated technical manpower. So how can we have something which is decentralized and uses less manpower? And should be able to sort of sustain it for at least for 8 to 10 years. What I had again in India file, I have just put some 4 or 5 points here, that in spite of, like we make something like 260 to 70 million tons of food grains, 300 million tons of fruits and vegetables. You can just go and see this data on the Ministry of Food Processing, MOFPI's website, or any government agriculture department website, that you have something like 180 million tons of milk, 5.3 million tons of meat, 75 billion eggs per year, or something. In spite of this, we are not able to sort of, the systems are unable to deliver RDA, the simple thing that sort of, the National Institute of Nutrition at Hyderabad tells you that, gives you tables as to based on your age and sex, and like any special conditions, like if you're pregnant or sort of, in certain age gaps, they give you a table of RDAs, and we are unable to sort of, the systems are unable to deliver that. And sort of, we know in the science of nutrition that it's not only calories and proteins. We say that after green revolution in agriculture, we have shifted our focus from foods security to nutrition security. So the role of micronutrients is also extremely important. Now the science of medicine tells us that if you lack in zinc, how children can be stunted, for example. Okay, so it's not only proteins and calories, because earlier our sort of, science of nutrition would say that 2,400 kilocalories per day you give to a sort of an adult, it's good enough. But you have the role of specific role of these vitamins, minerals, how we can sort of build the immunity and things like that, right? So So what else? I have put recent data, some more sort of, since on your website, you see that you also believe in, evidence-based advocacy, evidence-based advocacy. So how do you create evidence? So you have some data on the child malnutrition, for example, which says that still we are not sort of, an arrived country, if I'm talking about India, and sort of, and this sort of, malnourished children who become malnourished adults, and this sort of in the tribal areas, this adolescent girl becoming young sort of mother at the age of 17, 18, how she delivers again a child who is malnourished, and then the cycle continues, and things like that, and this is not something which is affordable or tolerable for an economy in transition like India. Malnutrition is something which, very, very quickly we need to sort of, get to a sort of results. And again, there's a lot of data on, like, on global hunger index, for example, India being ranked at, like, 90th place out of 121 countries, and how do we sort of, sort of help. So what we have talked about is, like, as I said, the case studies. So let me actually take you to my first video film, if I'm allowed to put that. So I have said that low-cost bamboo polyhouse as a Nutri garden in Palghar district. We actually put up through a MTech project last year, 2 polyhouses were constructed. So polyhouse growing for our ornamental plant is nothing new. But how can we sort of, what was the innovation that we had here was a conventional polyhouse which is constructed out of steel, costs something like 3.5 to 4 lakhs. Okay, for about 1.25 guntas, or about 1,250 square feet. Now, how do we bring that initial cost down is something which is narrated in my film here. And let me see if I can start this film. Oh, sorry. This is a film on Jaggery. I'm sorry. Let me go here. I play here. What is happening? Why am I not being able to play this film?
If you probably have on your desktop, you could play it from there as well, or if you could try right clicking it, if that helps.
Right click, and I should say what?
Okay, if you have it on a laptop, probably you could play it from there. Otherwise, we could.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry about that. That's one sec. Otherwise, what I will do is I'll share this what you call the one sec. Let me see if I can just last try if I can. Is it seen, Surbi?
Yes, yes, we can see it.
Okay. We are now going to narrate to you about a project that IIT Bombay, in association with BIF, we carried out in Palghar district. The project is how to build a low-cost polyhouse using bamboo.
Jawhar is a hilly region in Palghar district of Maharashtra with an average annual rainfall of more than 3,000 millimeters. Even with this high rainfall, this region suffers from heavy water scarcity after January every year. Historically, high levels of malnutrition is prevalent in these areas. One of the ideas for these farmers is to adopt a concept of nutri-gardens.
This is actually a fusion of two different concepts. You have combined a polyhouse concept and a kitchen garden, and now we call this project as Nutri Gardens using the low-cost bamboo houses. This project was carried out in the framework of an MTech project of Dhaneshwar, our student at Sitara at Bombay.
Sitara, that is Center for Technology Alternatives for Rural Areas, is an academic unit within IIT Bombay. It has its own master's and PhD program, which is of interdisciplinary nature. Sitara tries to sensitize engineers to the wider needs of society, and we train our engineers as professionals who can work on the interface of technology and development.
Palghar in Maharashtra is one of the hotspots of malnutrition. Farming continues to be primary occupation in rural India. Agriculture is directly linked with the nutrition status of children and mothers. Various studies clearly indicate that absence of dietary diversity is one of the significant factors affecting malnutrition.
In my project, I'm concentrating on how we can increase the dietary diversity along with the wealth index for a rural farmer. In the nutrition garden, what we mean is to grow the nutritious vegetables in the periphery of household to fulfill the nutritional requirements of the family.
To increase dietary diversity, many government and non-government organizations started promoting kitchen gardens or nutri-gardens.
We found that three major constraints are faced by the farmers in growing under the nutrition garden. The first major constraint is of seasonal water scarcity in summer. Another constraint is of heavy rainfall in monsoon. Third constraint is they need the protection from these free animals. To address the first two constraints, we came to know that protected cultivation can be the best solution for fulfilling the nutritional requirements along with increasing their wealth index.
You are here actually in the very interiors of Jawhar Taluka of Palghar district in Maharashtra. But what you see here is kind of a barren land. Nothing seems to be growing here. And when this particular farmer, Mr. Valvi, moved here with his sort of ancestral and inherited property, he started growing few things which was perhaps good for agri-horticulture, and therefore BIF came and selected this, and now we have selected this site for a polyhouse.
BIF डेव्हलपमेंट रिसर्च फाउंडेशन ऑर्गनायझेशन डॉक्टर मणिभाई देसाई यांनी 1967 साली स्थापन केली आणि आज BIFचं काम हे 13 राज्यामध्ये 1 लाख खेडेगावापर्यंत पोहोचलाय. याच्यामध्ये जे गरीबातले गरीब शेतकरी आहेत किंवा जे गरीब फॅमिलीज आहेत त्यांच्यासाठी एक सस्टेनेबल लाईव्हलीहूड क्रिएशनचं काम हे BIF वेगवेगळ्या माध्यमातून करत असतं.
आपण वाडी क्षेत्रामध्ये उभं आहे. वाडी म्हणजे आमचं वेस्ट ऍग्रिकल्चर लँड डेव्हलपमेंट इनिशिएटिव्ह हा एक प्रोग्राम आहे जो की ऍग्री हॉर्टी फॉरेस्ट्री या कन्सेप्ट वरती तो आपण इथे राबवतो, ज्यामध्ये 1 एकर ह्या पडीक लागवडी योग्य क्षेत्रावरती आपण आंबा, काजू आणि त्याचबरोबर फॉरेस्ट्री ट्रीज ज्यामध्ये बांबू, साग इत्यादी प्रकारची रोपांची लागवड आपण इथे करतोय. त्याचबरोबर त्यासोबत आपण आंतरपीक म्हणून मोगरा तसेच वेगवेगळ्या प्रकारचा भाजीपाला शेतकऱ्याचा एक शाश्वत उपजीविका कशी चालेल हा एक ह्या कार्यक्रमाचा एक भाग आहे.
ही शेती माझ्या वडिलांनी फार पूर्वीपासून शेती करत होते आणि 1-2 एकर ही पडीतच होती. ते BIF संस्था मार्फत मला वाडी मिळाली तिथे मी हे मोगरा आणि आंबा काजू लावलेला आहे. तिथे मी मेहनत करतोय.
आमच्या बालापूरमध्ये बायो प्रोजेक्ट चालू झाला म्हणून त्याच्या मार्फत आम्ही आंबा काजू ती वाढी घेतली. पोली हाऊस आम्हाला घेण्याचे कारण असं की पावसाळ्यात इकडे जास्त पाऊस असतो म्हणून आम्हाला काही भाजीपाला पीक घेता नाहीत. पोली हाऊस मध्ये सध्या आम्ही मिरची लावलेला आहे, ढोबळी मिरची लावली आणि बरेचसं काही काही अजून लावणार आहे.
In this project, we have designed and developed a bamboo-based polyhouse of 128 square meters, aiming to provide year-round nutrition security for a household. It is also possible to sell the surplus produce in markets for additional revenue.
We gathered many of the quotations for the steel or GI-based polyhouse from many of the contractors. So we found that the minimum of the quotation value for 100 square meter of polyhouse was of 2,77,000. So this is not feasible for a small-scale farmer. And the innovative in this project is that we are using bamboo instead of steel.
बांबूबद्दल स्ट्रक्चर उभा करणार होतो किंवा बरेचसे लोकांचे आम्ही असे सर्वे केले. आम्हाला असं सांगितलं की अरे याची जॉइनरी फार डिफिकल्ट जाणार आहे, याचे बांबू तुम्ही जर ती खिळ्याने जर तुम्ही जोडले तर ते क्रॅक होणार आहेत, तर ते टिकणार नाहीत, तर त्याचं तुम्हाला फाउंडेशन. तर अशा बऱ्याचशा गोष्टी ज्ञानेश्वरने स्टडी करून त्याचं लिटरेचर रिव्ह्यू करून त्या बांबू सप्लायरशी बोलून त्याच्यानंतर त्याच्या फॅब्रिकेटरशी बोलून आणि नंतर मग फायनली त्यांना मिस्टर मोरे म्हणून नाशिकचे फॅब्रिकेटर आहेत ज्यांच्या बरोबर त्यांनी ते डिझाईन करून त्याचे जॉईंट्स जे तुम्हाला वरती दिसत आहेत आता.
Organic manure like neem powder, biocompost, stera meal, Jivamrit will be used. The recommendations on agronomy and farming practices emerged from the experiences of BIOF Agri team working at its Jawhar Center. The current investment cost of the 2 pilot bamboo polyhouse is 92,000 rupees each, which is 1/3 of the GI steel polyhouse design available in markets.
So let me stop this at here, and I will actually show you the other sort of intervention which was at Sion Hospital. I'll show that, and then I think we'll take for questions. Is that okay, Dr. Surbi?
Yes, that sounds good.
So just we'll show this what we did at the Mumbai Sion Hospital, which some of you may know. Is it visible, or I should make it more full screen? Can you see it?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, yeah. So this is it, and I think I would just say this, that I have worked on some other things like installing Mogra cold storage. Mogra is like jasmine flowers, how it has helped the small farmers in sort of creating some value addition, because when it comes from Palghar to the other market, or it goes from Palghar to Nashik market, how we can extend the shelf life. Then also we have worked on this evaporatively cool structures for fresh vegetables in absence of electricity. How do we sort of extend shelf life of vegetables that are grown in open, as well as those polyhouse cultivations. Also, I have worked on small scale seed storage systems, which you can sort of preserve, so that have a viability and germination count. Maybe some other time, if there is an interest, we can sort of engage, and though you can't cover everything in one talk. So, Dr. Surbi, I will thank here for ASAR for giving this opportunity to share at least some thoughts, some ideas. How do we sort of create livelihood options, and at the same time, trying to help the government actions like ICDS, or Women and Child Development Ministry, public health sort of institutions like Sion Hospital, a public hospital, how to sort of solve problems in a small way by doing this multidisciplinary kind of approach in problem solving. So I'll take for any questions if you have, Dr. Subhi.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Shah, for such an enlightening talk. It was really interesting. And the first question that we have is from Atmika, and she's asking that how is agricultural technology going to cope or catch up to climate change impact on food security?
Right. So, climate change means, like there is some talk about, the cropping pattern that we have. One effect of climate change, and which all of us are seeing, is, those sudden rainfalls, and, whatever, 2,000, 4,000 millimeter, whatever rain we were getting in Konkan areas, or based on whatever like region you are, rain shadow region where you have only 500 millimeters rain. So what has happened, one of the impact of that climate change is, like, the number of episodes of rains have reduced. So how do we respond to this in a manner that, we call it, in botany, C3 and C4 plants. So how so there is this a resilience of one is like, the varieties that you develop, which are sort of resistant to these kinds of climate changes, is one effort. So plant breeders can sort of develop varieties which can be more resistant to droughts, as well as sort of heavy rainfall areas for rice, for example, which is grown in Kharif. So there is this kind of a sort of development, and also how we sort of adopt to this. Like you indirectly heard about that Wadi program of our partner, which has a headquarters in Pune, called BAYF, Bharatiya Agro-Based Industries Foundation. So they have, if you have just 1 acre of a land or half acre of land, that Dr. Dabolkar had this kind of, how can you generate that 1 lakh from 1 acre land, and with this kind of a climate. So Wadi was something which you had heard, that water and land management in this climate resilient technologies that we sort of talk about. So I hope at least to an extent I answered. It's a large subject, as to how do we sort of so lots of other things other than waters and rains and all that, like things like carbon dioxide build up and things like that. So it's a big subject, and it's a hot topic that is being discussed. I can talk to her offline.
Okay. Great. So the next question is from Shweta Dubey, and she's asking, what was the impact of RUTF intervention in managing SAM patients in the Sion Hospital?
Yeah, so, like when we published that in a pediatrics on-call journal, we had something like 45% of the children recruited from like something like 1,200 children were scoped out from sort of, these were all children below 6 years who had come to Sion Hospital and were registered in our program, and we had some kind of a 3 months of intervention. Something like 45% of them, we could bring them out of this SAM after that 3 months of intervention. So how do we sort of decide SAM? I think since quite a few of our from medical sciences, you know that we take the sort of, mid-arm circumference is one thing which we take. It has to be more than 11.5 centimeters, 115 millimeters. And also the weight to height ratio, it has to be like between -1 and -2 standard deviation. If it is below -3 standard deviation, your condition is called as SAM. So how do you bring that child from that -3 standard deviation to between -1 and -2 is something which so our RUTF or MNT, as we called it, brought something like 45% of the children out of this SAM condition. Yeah.
I would like to follow up on that question. How did that compare? Like before this, were there any studies done with the other interventions that were being used for SAM before? Like you said that in Anganwadi, we have food that is not particularly for SAM. But like before this, what was being done and how was this an improvement on that?
Yeah, so earlier the protocol was like the SAM is as you know that it is called as a medical condition, because the risk of mortality is something like 9 times more than what normal child or something like that. So when you have that high risk of mortality, the standard protocol is to send the child to NRC, and every district has one hospital which is declared as nutrition rehabilitation center, and you have the child along with the mother or father of the child has to come to the NRC, and then they had some sort of protocol followed. But RUTF was not something which was a protocol. They had RUTF was not part of this. So what we said was like, RUTF, because of its 19 micronutrients and the required 540 kilocalories per 100 gram, and then based on the weight of the child, there is a sort of protocol which we have come out is like, you give either 1 cup or 2 cups. So 1 cup is 100 gram, and if the child is close to 5 years, then you have to give 2 cups, which is about 1100 kilocalories or things like that. So yes, this is something which was a kind of an intervention which was tried outside, in UNICEF and WHO had done this, and sort of this is actually also called as a nutrition dense food, or lipid dense food in literature, if you see. And they said that in 14 days you can sort of bring, if you see those growth charts and the child which is lagging behind in terms of its weight and height, there has been a sort of results, and as I said, 45% of them we could bring them out of SAM. Yeah.
So following up on that question, there is another question about SAM, that is there a risk from Shweta Dubey, that is there a risk that the recovered patients might fall into SAM again, and then are there any associated interventions to avoid that?
Yeah, so like there is this what you call the pediatrics department or nutrition section follows up, and they sort of they typically call it as a relapse. Relapse of a child again back into this, and these children were followed at least for 6 months, if not for 1 year. Some of them were followed for a year, but you did not have in those 45% children who were sort of recovered from that SAM condition and improved, and their sort of weight to height ratio was sort of in above -2 standard deviations, or what you call the Z scores were -2, and they did not relapse into this, so they were followed for 6 months after the intervention period. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Shweta. Hope that answers your questions. We have a lot of questions coming on, so
yeah.
Dr. Shah, you could decide how many you want to take. So
sure, and if those whose questions are not answered, you can provide them my email ID. Yes. And I would be glad to sort of, engage in a discussion on sort of any possible sort of, clarifying their doubts and questions that they may have.
Oh, that would be great. So the next question right now is, hybrid crop is also reducing the nutritive value. There are organic products available, but they are not that economically affordable. So how can this be countered? This is a question by Omkar Prashant Gurav.
Yeah, Omkar, what is happening is, because in the first 3 years, when a farmer shifts from chemical farming to organic farming, for first 3 years he does not get the productivity. So essentially, if you go to a DMart or a big mall or a food mall, you see that those organic products are considered as premium products, and then they are slightly higher or slightly more expensive than a rice which is organically produced, maybe sold at a premium price. Or if you just see even Jaggery, our own product, like you will have organic and then chemical. So because the productivity is not same as what was seen in those chemical, I would not say hybrid. So hybrid is not necessarily not necessarily deprived of nutrients. So hybrid could be hybrid varieties. In the sense that there is a sort of evidence, that so milk, for example, they say A2 is better than A1. So now the A2 came from desi cows, and A1 came from hybrid cows. So many a times there is a confusion between that hybrid is bad. I mean, look at cotton, for example. Of course, cotton is not food, although we use cotton seeds for making oil, cotton seed oil. But BT cotton has done so much of good to Indian farmers, because there's no pesticide that you have to go. So hybrid is not necessarily bad. So let us not confuse between, hybrid being associated with chemical. Chemical is somewhere you use synthetic fertilizers, and hybrid not necessarily would demand more chemicals. I hope I answered to an extent the question.
So that was Omkar. Next question is from Dr. Maithili, and she's asking that how can medical college students be involved in such initiatives? And piggybacking on that question, yes, there was also another question which asked that other than science, other than the project at Science Hospital, are there any other tie-ups with health that are there in the kind of work that you've been doing where medical students can contribute?
Yes. So what actually Science Hospital did was, in fact, it came from the municipality, BMC, under which all these government colleges are there. They regularly conduct these kind of training, because that's why they call it as NRRTC, Nutrition Rehabilitation Training Center also. So they do conduct for doctors as well as these nurses, in handling CMAM projects and nutrition projects, and dealing with these kinds of nutrition issues. They do conduct training. So we IIT per se did not get into further dissemination. But say, for example, for KEM Hospital in Pune, there was one training program which we had organized, which had some of the participants were KEM doctors and pediatricians or something. They wanted to know how, for example, how do we define the RUTF or MNT? Like, is it calories, proteins? Where does the protein come from? Is it dairy proteins, or is it proteins coming from oil that was used, or the peanut butter that was used, and things like that. So we did conduct some programs, but it is always possible that some public health, because we have now, in addition to Sitara, we have one Center for Policy Studies, where some of the doctors themselves have registered for PhD programs in public health. Dentists have registered. I mean, somebody who have that kind of a approach to development through policy, one can do a PhD. And of course, at IIT Bombay, we have a department called BSBE, Biological Sciences and Biological Engineering, BSBE, where at least 25% of the students who register for MTech and PhD are from a medical fraternity. Yeah.
So that was Maithili. And the next question is again by Atmika about how is agricultural technology going to cope or catch up to climate change impact on food security? We took this one, right?
I think we took this
Yeah,
question,
I'm sorry. I'm
like
sorry.
I talked about C3, C4
Yeah,
and
you did. You did. We took this one. That was my bad. Yeah. So the question was, yeah, this was the same one, that other than prevention of SAM, what are some other areas, in your opinion, that warrants agro-public health intersectional work? This was the question.
Yes, like I mentioned to you cursorily about this dietary diversity. I think the sort of the expertise in nutrition domain is telling us that, something which is monotonous, is not something not good for even test nor for nutrition. So they say that there are some 7 groups of food types. If you Google, even Google Scholar articles will give you about diversity in nutrition. Why do we have to eat, for example, fruits that have the dark colors from outside? What kind of so if you have 7 different groups, that provides you the nutritional diversity. And it's like, it's clear that 1970s, 80s, like, what pushed us towards the green revolution was adequacy of calories, and that was considered as enough as sort of, a food security. But not of late, 1990 onwards, the people in food and nutrition domain are saying that it's not only calories or proteins, it is also those micronutrients. And that's why I brought that, who becomes stunted. If you want to go into the mechanisms of stunting, that some of those important micronutrients like zinc and all that. So if we can get it from naturals, as I mentioned about dark green fruits and things like that. So that's where is the connection of agriculture and nutrition and health. Agriculture, nutrition, health.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was Atmika's question. And I think we can take around the time right now. We can take around 2 more questions, and then the rest we can email to Professor Shah. So we have Sharvari asking why the pulses production is decreasing in India and what policies should be implemented to increase this production.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good question. It's a very good question, because if you see the data from 1960 onwards, just post-independence up to now, while you have the cereals, which shows a sort of, a growth in production and productivity, pulses curve is almost flat, if not reduced. I mean, if it not gone down. So pulse is almost constant, because we also had seen that none of the all green revolutions was only for rice and wheat. Okay, so nothing for these other crops, and pulses is one of them, So yes, we agree, and often at times pulses is not considered as a kind of a staple, because if you see ration shops, I don't know how active they are. In between they had this Shweta Patrika, and still all those programs are on 2 kilo rice and 4 kilo wheat or something like that, but nothing on pulses. But yes, particularly for population which is vegetarian, the importance of pulses for, protein supplement or supplying proteins is something which is very, very useful. And I agree with that. It's just that, farmers do not get adequate from pulses, and therefore the agriculture universities have not worked much on that, and yes, I do see what she's trying to say.
Yeah, so that was Sharvari Monday's question. Now the last question we'll be taking is by Arya, and she's asking if poly houses have any effect on the environment.
Not really. In fact, I had to cut short of that. The fabricator talks about actually bamboo, how being sort of, environmentally benign commodity, so it doesn't do any sort of, harm, because those plastics that we use is expected to last for something like 4 to 5 years, and a sort of I don't think the kind of a sort of production in 4 to 5 years. We say that in a year we get something like 4 to 5 cycles of vegetables. So in 5 years, like let's say if you have 15 to 20 cycles of vegetable productions of different green vegetables, whatever we talked about, in that bindi and brinjal and all those vegetables that we talked about, the looking at the productions and productivities that we had, the kind of environmental impact that it may have is minimal. At least that is what we think.
Okay. Arya, I hope that answers your question. So, yes, so Arya is saying thank you.
Yeah.
So actually, I think that we did cover most of the questions, and we, Professor Shah, you said that you would be okay with sharing your email ID with the participants so
Sure.
that they could, okay. So we could probably, yeah, we could just share your email ID with them later, probably after the meeting.
Sure.
And yes, okay. So this was a really, really interesting talk, and ASAR has so far been just, because we are mostly doctors, we've been focusing a lot on the health part of things, but we are trying to venture outside health into social sectors, and the agricultural sector definitely is so important because India is an agricultural country, and it's been years, and since we're still not able to develop there. So if we could also tie up with Sitara and help out in any way, ASAR would definitely love to venture into this.
Yes. Yeah, particularly the data, sort of how to make out of data. We have a different silo, like why I work on food formulations, agriculture. There's another group, you met at Oxford also, which tries to make on a large data. How do we sort of understand state versus state, different interventions made, and what does the sort of, how do we do data, the numbers that you see, how do we sort of make a sense of those large numbers? We have a separate silo on data visualization and making sort of interpretation from that data, handling using different available softwares in public domain. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that does sound quite interesting, and we will be, if we don't mind, we'll definitely be in touch with you for any potential projects or any potential collaborations that could be done with us. So if there is no more questions, I think we could wrap up the talk. Does anybody have anything else they would like to say? Okay, I think we've already, yes, gone beyond time. So thank you so much, Dr. Shah, for coming today, and it has definitely been a great talk. And if there's nothing else, then we can wrap this session up, and we'll share your email ID with the participants. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Surbi. Yeah. And my apologies for, for a few minutes when I could not get to the video. Right. Okay.
Oh, no. Our apologies, definitely, because of the whole link confusion that happened at the beginning. So, but
okay. And good that we were not interrupted by that Zoom policy of stopping a session. They, I think, upgraded our conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We got really lucky there. But yes, thank you so much for the time.
Can I leave? Can I leave?
Guys, let me just put Professor Shah's email ID in the chat box, so whoever wants it can access it. Okay, so I've put his email ID in the chat box for anybody who wants to access it. Or you can just note it down, and if you have any further questions, you could probably get in touch. And thank you so much, everybody, for attending one of our first public ASAR talks. And we keep having talks like this every Sunday. So anytime you all can see it over WhatsApp or our social media, do join in. Thank you.